Let's see. Here. Erica. Is it right, Erica? Here. Okay. And Evelyn. I thought I saw that. Oh, Evelyn. Oh, I saw it. Okay. I like it. Evelyn always has the clearest picture, and I'm not sure why. Maybe she has a super duper computer or something.
I don't know. My computer, I got it like 2019.
Oh, okay.
That's a little bit old.
It's like an HD TV. Okay. So before we start, I wanted to know if you guys had any questions about the policy memo assignment. If you had a chance to look at it, I did extend the deadline to September 30th to give you some time to kind of absorb the assignment. And I really would like to do the assignment early on and think about what little nuggets you can borrow from pieces of the course so far that you can put in the memo. This is very different from like a multiple choice quiz. It's up to you and requires you to do something. So any questions on it? And of course, you can email me in the near future, but September 30th is the new date.
I have a question.
Sure.
So for the memo, we're just pulling from resources that we've read or seen in the class so far.
Anything we've discussed, anything on the PowerPoint, the readings, and actually on the actual assignment, I have a list of topics that you could possibly put in if you want to, so that you don't have to, reinvent the wheel. But don't use all those topics. Just use some.
Okay,
whatever
and then
you think is most relevant.
and we have to include a bibliography just so we cite the sources that we use.
Yes. I paused because I don't want you to focus too much on that. I'm not actually grading on that, but you do have to let me know where you got the information. Yeah, that's important. I will start looking closely at like citation and APA until we get to annotated bibliography and the literature. Yeah, but let me know where you got the information. Any other questions? So we're just going to finish up. I think I have one more slide on the PowerPoint from last week, and then we're going to move on to early childhood language. So incredibly exciting.
Yeah, I can definitely use that right now because in my clinicals, I have some English language learners, and one of them came up to me speaking Spanish and only Spanish, and I had no idea what he was saying.
Oh, interesting. Is it a bilingual course or is it ESL?
It's actually a dual language school.
Oh, okay.
So it's at Stowe Elementary. I don't know if you've ever heard of it before. It's next to Humboldt.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and one of the girls, she only speaks and understands Spanish as well. So it's very complicated to like understand what they're saying.
So, is that the only student who only speaks Spanish?
Yeah, I have some students who need like special services. One of them I think is only like a speaking student. So you actually have to like speak to him and get references and stuff.
What grade is this?
This is pre-K.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
So the kid that came up to me and started speaking Spanish, he I'm pretty sure he understands English as well, but I guess
Mhm.
having him understand English and like translate those words into English too.
I think that's the first thing that students
Can you
really
do my
realize
clarify count
that
into pre-K? Okay.
students, the teacher is calling them English language learners, I know it's the
Yeah.
teacher wrong, because when you hear them speak, they almost sound like native English speakers. But what we know is that there's four.
Recording in progress.
What we know is that there are four language learning domains: reading, writing, speaking, listening. And so the speaking could sound native like, and the reading, perhaps the reading is at a much lower level. And that's very common. So it's not common for all four domains to rise equally. In fact, I don't think that really happens. That would be extremely rare.
Yeah, I have apparently, according to my CT, my cooperating teacher, she's like there are 7 ELLs as identified by like their enrollment paperwork, but she's wanting to like make sure that they are actually ELLs or not. So she's like doing like language screeners with them and stuff.
Good, because a lot of times students are misplaced.
Yeah.
It's very, very common, and it's avoidable. Just asking a few more questions. Just because someone has a last name like Rodriguez or Mohammed doesn't mean that they're not an English language speaker. So I think schools still make that mistake, and it's inexcusable in 2021, really. And someone could have a last name that we think of as, oh, that's an English last name. So you can't be an English language learner. But I have relatives in Cuba. I have my cousin who's a little bit older than me. His name is James. He speaks no English. It is very laborious with him on social media because I have to, I know Spanish, but not like that. And so I have to constantly translate. Sometimes I force him to do English writing. But if you were just to see his name on paper, you would think, oh, he's English speaking. And that's a very common phenomenon in some countries where people went generations ago, right? In my case, people left other Caribbean islands. Like in my case, Barbados went to Panama and Cuba. That's where my family lived. Many of them intermarried and they have Spanish last names, but many of them don't. Right? Payne is the last name from Barbados. So we have to make sure we don't make assumptions. Ready to start? Okay, so this is the very last piece from last week. Okay, so we're going to leave this section on linguistic imperialism. We're going to revisit it again. But the author that I talked a lot about, Sutani, but these are the set of questions that she developed for teachers to really reflect on their own identity, which is absolutely crucial. And you don't see this topic in many books, but this is actually the focus of her research. So what I'd like to do is either take out a paper or get a Word document. And I want you to answer these questions. You're not going to turn them into, but I want you to get into the practice as future teachers to reflect on your own identity and think about how it might influence your teaching and how students might receive it. Okay, let me move the. So can you see the 5 questions? Can you guys see the, oh, okay. So now it's up to you. I'll ask you afterwards if you guys want to share in groups, or we can just move on because reflection is just that personal. So I'm inclined for you to just answer the questions for yourself. But if you want to share, let me know. Let us know afterwards. Okay, I'll be quiet once right done. Tiny more questions after that. think about 5 more. Want to wind down, take another minute? Okay. How did that feel answering those questions for yourself? And does anyone want to chime in about it? Anything about it? Evelyn?
For the first question, with how to identify myself racially, I always feel like confused about that question because usually in like school forms, they have like five like main ones, like white, I forgot the other ones, but they never have like a category for like Hispanic people or Latin people.
So yeah, it is very confusing, and actually it has changed over the years. So since Latino is an ethnicity, it's in a separate category. And they usually only ask about race, and then separately they ask, are you Latino or are you Hispanic? Yes or no, and that's it. But it kind of forces you to choose what racial box that you're in. It makes me wonder if it's going to be like this generations from now, because there's so many people who are mixed, and that's nothing new. But what they say is like 23% of all children who are born are to, a mixed couple. One is one race, one is the other. But in the case of Latino, like they're trying to force you to choose white or black. And as we learned last week, and you probably already knew this, that race is something that is contrived. It's a construct, really not biological. So you and lots of other people are confused about that. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you.
It's
For
something that,
me,
oh, go ahead.
Danny?
so for me to answer that, I know it's looking at what usually is Latino, Hispanic, Asian, Black, white, and then I always put others and I always put Mexican because I feel that I'm not gonna let them take away what little I have.
Well, that's interesting too, because ethnicity is more granular than just like Muslim, which is a religion, or or Latino, right? It's so much more granular. You take someone who grew up in the Dominican Republic and someone who's from Mexico, of course they have language in common. They might even have religion in common, but I bet that even looks different. Culturally, they're so different.
Yeah, like when I worked in the school, the one thing I told if you're really ask me, what are you? And I told them Mexican. I don't believe in this. Well, not that I believe this. Like the fact that we're being put in Latino and Hispanic, it don't even make sense because we're a bigger family. And
You're going in and out, Manny.
so it's interesting. Can you hear me?
Can you move to another spot, maybe where we can hear you better? Doesn't sound like you were saying something profound.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So basically, what I was saying is that even though I identify as Mexican, I still consider the whole Latino because, like I said, the Peruvian family asked me, well, what was I? I'm like, I'm Mexican, but America made a mistake by making us Latinos because we're now part of my family too, and they were really happy about that welcome attitude.
That's a beautiful thing. It's almost like Mexican is the nuclear family, Latino is the extended family. But that whole race thing. Okay, so let me take you back to this picture which I had on the screencast last week. So all of these women are considered Black. So different from one another. So do you know why that is? I didn't go into it last week, but I don't know if you guys ever learned about this in history. Why would they all be considered Black?
Is it because
And in
they
fact,
kind of look similar?
oh, say that again, Evelyn.
Is it because they have like similar features? Like maybe?
Do they?
No, because the one in the lower left corner, she has like a bridged nose. Like no offense or anything, but they claim Black people have like wider shaped noses and stuff.
Yeah. No, it's nothing to be offended by. Like, that's the beauty. The beauty is in our diversity. And the reason why there are the wide noses is because in hot climates like Africa, which is the hottest climate, you know, we are built to breathe the air, and we don't need the things like, so a narrow nose is for colder climates, right? Because we don't want the cold air to get in.
I feel like it's the same thing for the melanin in our skin.
Yes.
And for we have such dark skin is because we can possibly block out the extra sunbeams from damaging our skin as well.
Exactly. Mother Nature, or if you're religious, God, you know, didn't make any mistakes. The dark skin is to protect you from the harsh sun. But the reason why these four women are considered Black or African American is it could be traced back to slavery. So all of this is profit driven. It's called the one drop rule, and it goes back to the 1600s. Has anyone heard of the one drop rule? No? Okay. So the one drop rule was that even if you were only, I think it was 1/32 Black, so only if you were a very tiny segment of you had Black heritage, Black blood, you were still considered Black so that you could be enslaved, right? And as a consequence, whoever owned you would make more money, right? The more slaves you accumulated, the more money that you made. And in 1808, you might not know this because they don't really teach it. Even though slavery ended in this country in 1865, in 1808, a law came down saying you cannot get Africans from Africa anymore for slavery. You have to just use the ones here. The reasoning they gave was that it's too hard to break in Africans. You know, they rebel. They want to keep their name, their language, their food, and they don't know what's going on, right? So Well, let's just use the ones who are here and breed them. So how did they breed them? The slave masters would go into um, the, the wood cabins where the enslaved Africans lived and rape the women, even in front of the men. So that would produce babies, and those babies would be mixed, but they would be the property of the slave owner and could be used for labor. They didn't have to buy them because they were breeding them. I know it's disgusting. But the one drop rule is still, it's still a thing all these generations later. It's hard for something like that to die out. So even now in the Black community, like we can usually tell if you've got some Black in you and then you're Black. And that comes from slavery. So that's the history. So, it could be that 5 generations from now, there's no boxes to check anymore. None of us will be here to find out. And maybe it'll be sooner. I don't know. Does anyone want to comment on any of the other questions? If not, we can go on. I think it's important for you to reflect, and if you want to share it, you don't have to.
So for number 3, like I'm half Pakistani and half Indian, which like it doesn't make sense to a lot of people because they came from the same country. So that's like
No, they
3.
do.
Yeah, like some people think it's the same thing. And I was just wondering for number 3, because they were colonized by the British, and that's what kind of broke apart the 2 countries. I don't know if that would be considered like a colonizing nation or with that.
So I don't know that much about Pakistan, but I know that India was the colonized nation, and it was colonized before the breakoff. So all those people are from colonized nations, from a colonized nation, like originally, because the impact of colonialism or imperialism can be felt generations out. This is why in India and in Pakistan, these skin bleaching companies are the most successful.
That's very true.
You've heard about it, right?
Yeah, everywhere over there.
Even more successful than in Africa, because they're doing it in Africa too. But it's even more successful in India, people trying to brighten their skin.
Yeah, even buying like foundation that's like way too light for them to brighten their complexion. I've seen it, all of it. They even do it here.
They do it here too, yes. So that's enough to tell me that they're impacted by colonization that happened, a while ago. And that's called coloniality. Yeah. It's sad. So I want you to think about like how you deal with that as a teacher, because you'll hear things like that coming from children, because they repeat and they absorb what they hear at home from parents and grandparents. It becomes a sort of self-hatred, unfortunately. Thank you guys. Anything else before we move on? Very interesting comments from. Okay, now going to move on. Here it is. We're going to switch gears. One more time. I'll just leave it like this. So we're going to talk about language learning in early childhood. Some of you are early childhood majors, but even if you're not, some of what we're going to talk about like extends beyond early childhood. So let's begin. Okay, so learning a language for the first time is quite an amazing feat. But why do people say that? What about learning a language for the first time as a baby, a toddler? What about that is amazing, in your opinion? Or you may not think it's amazing at all.
The fact that we have so many different languages, when you learn that language, you picked it up so easily. And when you're older and you try to learn a new language, it's very difficult.
Right, and it's amazing because like we're so much smarter when we're older. So how is it that these children? It seems like magic. Like you say, it seems to happen so quickly. So the speed at which it happens. Thank you, Manny. Anything else that's amazing about it? Oh, I'm sorry, Amanda. I didn't see Amanda's comment. Let me just read it. If I may add to that, I'm Middle Eastern and there is never an option for us. Yes. At a young age, I was so confused what to put for the ISAP. So I asked my teacher and she just said, put white. But now I put Middle Eastern because it may seem like the minority, but it possibly may be a majority in a state or country. Thank you for that comment. Yeah, I had a student a couple of years ago who was from Morocco. Morocco is in Africa. When people think about Africans, they usually think about dark people. Africa is very diverse. And she did not look black at all, but she said, but I am African American because I'm from Africa. Like that was a good example of like maybe we need to redefine all this. Because she's more African than I am. Okay, is there anything else you find amazing about young children learning language for the first time? Are any of you parents or aunts or uncles?
I'm not a parent, but I find it amazing that children learn languages so quickly. Like, and it's amazing how different they are. Because I have my cousin who likes to speak only in English. Even though her family around speaks Spanish, she only prefers to speak English.
How old is she?
She started kindergarten, so she's 5 years old. And then I have my niece who is a year younger than her, so she's or 2 years. She's like 2, and she only prefers to speak Spanish. And she doesn't, when she speaks her in English, she understands, but she replies back in Spanish.
So in many ways, she's bilingual, but she's asserting her preference. And the preference may or may not change when she gets to school. I think it's significant that the kindergarten age child prefers English. She's probably in an English speaking class, right? Yeah. Mainstream. Mm-hmm.
And she's always been like that. Like my cousin, even before she like started school, she always wanted to speak English. So she understands Spanish, but she prefers to speak and reply in English.
Oh, that's so interesting.
I have a different situation. So my nieces and nephews intend to speak both Arabic and English. One example was when my niece was probably like 1, she was wanting to tell her mom, Mama Yalla, which means like Mom, let's go. So Yalla
Okay.
is an Arabic language, and she's like Mama Yalla. So when we all heard that, we're like, oh my God, it's so cute the way she said it. They intend to both speak both languages. I'm assuming it's because they have like equal, what do you call it?
Exposure.
Yeah, equal exposure to both languages.
Huh? So yeah, so that's not common when the exposure is equal, but it's a good thing because they'll truly come out bilingual. Um, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Anything else? Anyone around baby? What do they do first?
We learned the word mom or dad, like mama, like or
Huh?
dad.
They do, and it's exciting when they do that. Parents are waiting on the edge of their seat, but they do some things before that happens. So let's look at it. Let's look at the question. What pushes children to go on developing complex grammatical language, even though their early simple communication is successful for most purposes, right? Their early communication seems to work for the things that they need, right? When they cry, the parent comes and changes the diaper or feeds them, rocks them. So that early communication works. So why? What is it inside of children that pushes them to go on developing more complex structure? Gonna step away for 1 minute while you think about that. Right back. Okay. So do you think they're just simply repeating everything that they hear? Or is there something else going on? What do you think?
Isn't it maybe just repeat what they hear? Because they're like paying attention to what their parents are saying if they're little. And it's like the same what he like what to do, like what he does, what to do.
So you're right that that's a big part of it.
I think
Right? They hear new sounds and new words and eventually repeat them. But research tells us that that's definitely not everything because children create new combinations of words that they've never heard when they start putting together words. So I think it's a combination, but you're right that imitation is important. So here are the, I should say, the first 3 years. The first 3 years, the milestone and developmental sequence. Okay. First, we need to say, and this is the most fascinating thing about all of this, is that first language acquisition, that's when you're acquiring your first language, a baby or a toddler. The sequence is similar all over the world. That's fascinating. That tells us something. And here's what the developmental sequences pretty much look like. The earliest vocalizations are involuntary crying, right? It's not like the very young baby is crying for a specific purpose. In other words, a 1-month-old or a 2-week-old is not crying to communicate that they want their diaper changed, right? It's when they get to be older little babies. So we move from involuntary crying, the crying just happens, to voluntary crying, which is more strategic. Then we move on to cooing and gurgling. And those are signs of contentment. That usually happens when their stomach is full, they've been changed, they're being cuddled, right? Cooing and gurgling, those are sounds. Then comes auditory discrimination, where infants are able to hear subtle differences in the sounds of humans. And they actually begin to do this while they're in the uterus, which is why when the baby is born, they can recognize their father's voice or the way he speaks, the mother's voice or the way she speaks. Isn't that fascinating? They haven't even been in the world for 5 minutes, but they can discriminate auditorily. Right? Infants stop making distinctions between sounds that are not phonemic in the language that is spoken around them. In other words, they know when a speaker is human, right? They know the difference between the way a human sounds and a dog, right? They might be scared of a dog bark or even a cat meow, or at the very least, they won't respond to it in the same way that they respond to any human. Whether children are becoming monolingual, or bilingual, or trilingual, it will be many months before their own vocalization begin to reflect the characteristics of the language or languages that they hear, and longer still before they connect language sounds with specific meanings, right? So it's debatable whether the very first time the baby says dad or papa, whether they really mean father. It's debatable. But think about it. The baby says papa, the father gets so excited and hugs him. And so over time, that baby realizes there's something with this papa and this man who hugs me. So then they begin to connect the two. It's not right away. Okay? So the language that they vocalize as babies may not reflect the language they're learning. And the language that they vocalize does not automatically connect to meaning. Sometimes they're just sounds. And even if they sound like the words we're familiar with, that baby may not be connecting those sounds to the meanings that we connect to. Does that make sense? So at 12 months, most babies, not all, most babies will have produced a word or two that everyone recognizes. At the age of 2, most children reliably produce at least 50 different words. So these are discrete words, right? One is not necessarily associated with the other. 50 independent words, at least by the age of 2. And they're not even in school. It's pretty amazing. Soon after that, they begin to combine words into what we call simple sentences. Simple sentences mean just have a noun and a verb. Like daddy milk or baby fall down. Right? We also call these telegraphic sentences. They tend to leave out the article, right? So the baby's not saying the baby fall down, right? So the baby moves out the articles at first. They're really not necessary, right, for our understanding. Usually the prepositions are left out, right? Prepositions like in, over, under, and on and on. And the helping verb, right? Like the verb to be that goes with the other verb. It's not necessary for them because meaning is understood without them, and they're not that sophisticated for that. Right? So actually, the speech that we hear from young children when they start to form simple sentences, that's usually when they're toddlers. Maybe, the younger toddler hears, the older toddler hears, but they form these sentences that are simple. This is much like a pigeon, not pigeon that flies, but the language that comes about before it's mature. For instance, back when people used to travel in groups and settle in places to do farming or to do fishing, invariably they would settle in places where they would be next to another cultural group. They spoke different languages, but they had to cooperate because invariably they had to trade with one another. There were no supermarkets back then. So they had to trade with one another. So they left out those unimportant grammatical type words when they were trading. They would say meat, fruit, right? And that meant that we're trading meat for fruit. Very similar to what we hear in telegraphic. Okay. Incredibly, in very young children, they get word order correct, right? The baby's not saying, young child is not saying, fall down, baby. The young child is saying, baby, fall down. So even though function words like articles, prepositions, and helping verbs, even though those are absent, we still have word order correct. So that tells you something, and it tells linguists a little something about what may be going on in our brain when we're born. Our brains are equipped for grammar, which is fascinating. Because we're human beings, our brains are equipped for grammar. There are other mammals, right, that are not human beings, and they are not equipped for grammar. So this is the order in which children basically, no matter what the language is, this is how they develop grammatical working in this basic order. And this knowledge is a result of lots and lots and lots of good research, longitudinal studies all over the world. So there are 14 grammatical morphemes that are acquired in a similar sequence, no matter what the language. So we have the present progressive. Of course, it sounds different in different languages, right? In Spanish, it's the ando at the end. In English, it's the ing. Mommy running. Okay, present progressive. After that is the full S, or however your language does full. 2 books. Before the child acquires the full S or the full, they say 2 books. And guess what? The English language learner, same way. Right? Then we have the irregular past form. Baby went. Okay, it already happened. Then we have the possessive F. Daddy's hat. Before the child is ready for vocalizing the possessive F, they simply say, Daddy's hat. Okay, then comes the copula. Okay, that helping verb is form of speech. Mommy is happy. Before their brains are ready to acquire that, they're saying, Mommy's happy. After that comes articles like the and a. After that comes the regular past PP. And after that comes the third person singular simple present S. She runs. Before that, it's simply she runs. Then we have the auxiliary is coming. Now, this sequence happens across languages. What I want to point out, it doesn't always happen at the same rate. All I'm saying here is that it happens in the same order. In other words, so the child who's using the progressive, the ing in the present, I can't say how old that child is. Sometimes they're younger, sometimes they're older. There's always a range we're talking about. And that's important to remember as teachers. We really don't learn until they pass that range. So it's not that they're using ing at 18 months. And if they don't do it at 18 months, there's problems. There's a range. All we're saying here is that the sequence is the same across languages, which is fascinating. Children do not acquire language at the same age or rate, but tend to acquire in the same order. Okay? Cross-sectional studies have confirmed this discovery. So, we have longitudinal studies that happen with the same children over years. They follow the children, large groups of children, over years. But then they also do cross-sectional studies, which are more like snapshots of a given point in time. Maybe they're only studying 2-year-olds, or they're only studying 12-month-olds. Okay, so when we have both studies happening on this very same subject of the order of acquisition, we can be pretty positive about the results. Okay? So we have something called the WUG test, W-U-G, that linguists invented. And specific Jean Berko Gleason is the person who first came out with the first WUG test. And it told us about young children and the language knowledge they possess. So I'm going to go to two very short videos about the WUG. Come out of this and go to the first one. Uh-oh. Get to share the sound with you. Can you see it? Video. Oh, okay.
This is a one. Now there's another one. There are two of them. There are two.
Start from the beginning.
This is a one. Now there's another one. There are two of them. There are
To illustrate that what the child has learned is a grammar and not a huge memory bank of phrases, Jean Gleason invented a test called the WUG test. This test shows how children can apply the rules of their language even to nonsense words that they could never have heard before.
there's another one. There are two of them. There are two rugs. Right. Oh, look at this funny one. This is a man who knows how to bod. He's bodding. He did the same thing yesterday. What did he do yesterday? Yesterday he bodded. Bodded, right. This is a gutch. Now there's another one. There are two of them. There are two gutches. Right. This is a pig who owns a hat. Whose hat is it? It is the Big's. Now there are two Bigs. They both own hats. Whose hats are they? They are the Big's.
You won't believe it. You don't have to work hard to learn a new language. Really? Yeah. The only thing. I'm going to show you some pictures. Okay?
Called the word test, and Jean's tube uses the original code she designed half a century ago. They showed that even with nonsense words they've never heard before, children can use grammatical rules that they've somehow absorbed.
What are they? You tell me. One. Say that louder? One. This is great. Very good. Okay. This is a man who knows how to bang. He's banging. He did the same thing yesterday. What did he do yesterday? Yesterday he banged. Very nice. Here is a man who knows how to zip. So what is he doing? He is zipping. Very good. What would you call a man whose job is to zip? He has to do it every day. His job is to zip. So he's a zipper. Very, very, very good.
Okay. So you guys kind of get the idea. These are nonsense words that don't exist in real life. And she even tested children younger than the little girl that you saw. And the children always put the correct grammar or morpheme onto the word. So it's like, we know that they haven't heard that word before, but they know how to use the grammar, which is fascinating. Okay, so there's also an order of acquisition to negation. Negation is when we use the negative in our speech. So they learn to comment on the disappearance of objects, refuse a suggestion, reject an assertion, even at the single word stage, right? Actually, before that single word stage, there's no concept of negation. So it's almost like the conceptual piece has to be in our brain before we can use the associated language. So for any of you who've had very young children or nieces or nephews, and you play peekaboo, where you hide behind the couch and you pop up and say peekaboo. Well, at a very young age, this game could be very upsetting because very young babies don't have a concept of you leaving and coming back. Like once they can't see you, they think you're just gone, and that's scary. So that's why I say the conceptual has to be grasped first. And once you grasp that, you can use the language you're able to. So here are the stages of the order of acquisition for what we call negation, the negative. Stage one, no. Okay, that's the first thing they learn is no, or one word sentence. Then they go on to be able to attach other words to it, like no cookie or no comb hair. Okay, they say that when they don't want the hair. Stage two, the sentence gets a little longer and the sentence subject may be included. So that's something new. Daddy, no comb hair. Okay, so we have a subject, daddy, so the language becomes more sophisticated. Stage 3 negation is inserted into a more complex sentence. The negative is inserted into a more complex sentence. I can't do it, right? Where can't is the negation. And it's sophisticated, right? Because they're, are you still there? Okay. Stage 4, children begin to attach the negative to the correct form of auxiliary verbs like do and be. So they'll say something like, we didn't have dinner. So negation becomes more and more sophisticated as the child gets older. There's also an order of acquisition to question. Who knew, right? The first question, the most common one when they're very, very young, is what? Sometimes it's what that? Because we're not using grammatical words yet, function words, all we're saying is what that? So they begin to become curious and they want to know what different things are. Here they are building their vocabulary. When they start asking questions, that's a good thing. When they don't ask questions, that's when we have to worry. Unless there's some kind of developmental delay, they start asking questions and it starts with what. Generally, the second question they're asking, question word is where and who. Who that? At the end of the second year, generally they start to ask why. When I say the end of the second year, that's when they're turning 2, right? The first year is 0 to 1. The second year is 1 to 2. So when they turn 2, that year between like they turning 2 to maybe 2.5 years old, or 3.5 rather, from 2 to 3.5, they're asking why like crazy. Why is a very sophisticated question. It's more theoretical, it's more abstract, because when you're asking what, you're asking, what is that phone? What is this bottle? You know, what? You're not using the word, but you're pointing. You're pointing to the cat. You're pointing to the door. What? Second is where and who, but next comes why. Why is a question that really engages adults. So it's an opportunity for us to engage children when they ask why. When children begin to understand manner and time, they ask how. And then they continue asking when and who. But when is important because before they have a concept of time, we're not going to ask when, right? I'm sure you've interacted with a child who doesn't understand what you mean when you say, we can do that tomorrow, or we did that yesterday. They don't know what that means because really there's no concept of time. Once the concept of time is introduced to their brain organically, then they can ask more, right? Let me say something about the question why, and I think we'll probably end on that. So the question why is such a good sign, and it's an opportunity for parents and other adults to get children ready for preschool. And it's not that you're giving them the answer. They might ask, why raining? Or why is it raining? Or they might ask, why is it hot? You know, whatever they ask, they're curious about. we don't always give the answer. As teachers especially, and even as parents, it's important for us to wonder with our children, wonder with our students. We're modeling for them. So it's up to us to be curious about what they're asking about. I don't know why. It's such a good question. Let's investigate, right? So that's our opportunity to open a whole new door, not for the student or for our children, but with them to investigate these things. And that's why Montessori and the Dewey style of education, and that Italian woman, Reggio, those people understood that it's important to wonder and investigate with our children. And that philosophy opens the door to designing curriculum as we go when it comes to young children. Designing curriculum that's based on students' curiosities in real time. Okay, I can go on and on about this, but I won't because we're out of time. We covered a lot of bases today. I will post the recording in ETL. Are there any questions or comments before we end?
Can I talk to you just before, after the class finish for 1 minute?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, guys, so I will see you all on Thursday. Bye.
Bye. Enjoy the
Bye-bye.
rest of your week.